let's dive into this week's episode of X-Men 97. Episode 7 is entitled Bright Eyes. And so the previous episode that we talked about last week was very much focused more on some isolated adventures from a couple of very, very key mutants and X-Men within this show. This week, I will say, without getting into the nitty-gritty of it just yet, definitely took the focus back to the larger group, and we got a chance to return to the primary group of heroes and mutants that we've been following, especially considering the events of episode 5 and just dealing with the fallout of that. This episode sort of picks up in that place to show us what the next few episodes are going to be as we start to round out the season and enter the home stretch. And so before we dive into spoilers and talk about all the details from episode 7, quickly, what did you just think about this latest edition of X-Men 97?
Man, I'm just going to sound like a broken record every week probably, but another tremendous episode, I think, from X-Men 97. There is a really big swing being taken for anybody who reads the comics or who has read the comics. There's a big swing being taken that not necessarily puts the question completely in future for me, but I have to side-eye it a little bit. So that's kind of like on the table. I'll explain what I'm talking about later, but overall, man, I think it's another very well-written episode, a lot of really cool surprises and a lot of cool action actually too. So it's so crazy again how so much happens in these episodes. Like I really can't believe it. Like when we come to talk about it, it's like 20 different points in 30 minutes. I'm like, how did they do this? Make it coherent and still keep it entertaining. It's really crazy, and I think they're doing a tremendous job. So still having a good time with the series. Absolutely, I still really like this episode. And yeah, that's pretty much it, man. I'm still here.
I had a similar thought about just the amount of stuff that they pack into all of these episodes. Like there's just always so much, just a wealth of Easter eggs and cameos and storylines that are being, put into these 30 to 35-minute episodes. It's a really great masterclass at how to just distribute your time well and distribute the real estate for all of these characters really well across the show. I think it also just helps that they don't have to do any sort of building blocks or foundational work because they have 5 years worth of a previous show to work off of. So all of that stuff that you normally would spend time on in a new series, quote unquote, they can bypass all of that, which is a really, really great asset that they have. But this episode in particular, I liked it a lot. I thought it was great. It started off really strong, and I also liked where the third act of the episode went. I also have seen some potential reservations about the ending and what it might point to, but by and large, my trust has mostly been given to them at this point, just based off of how we've seen a lot of this stuff. And so I'm still very confident that it'll end in a really, really satisfying way. And I also just like the opportunity to continue to highlight characters that have just not gotten their proper due in previous iterations or other adaptations. This week was no exception. There's one character where it's like, wow, we see exactly what you're capable of under the right circumstances. And I love that. I love that we can just go there and go forward with some of these characters. But I think overall X-Men 97, despite some nitpicks here and there, despite some question marks around choices and even pacing, for the most part, they're doing really, really tremendous work. And I think that this episode continues that trend mostly throughout the course of the episode. And so excited to dive in and talk about the details here. So with all of that said, guys, if you've not listened or watched episode 7 of X-Men 97 Bright Eyes, definitely go watch that on Disney Plus and come and finish the rest of our conversation. This is your official spoiler warning. So as we dive in here, this episode picks up with a funeral for Gambit. It's picking up directly after the events of episode 5. We saw the huge destruction of Genosha. There was a high body count. A lot of people died, including Gambit, and who we thought to be dead, Magneto, but we presumed that he would be alive somewhere, which we found out at the end of the episode. He is indeed alive, but Gambit is dead at this point, and they're hosting this funeral for them. And Nightcrawler is sort of giving a eulogy. He's giving this really loving and moving eulogy about Gambit's life. And then by the end of it, we see that Rogue, who is Gambit's, lover to a certain extent, is not present at the funeral. And I think Nightcrawler says something very apropos to Rogue in that she has to solve things out for herself. Well, that's exactly what the hell she's doing. She is solving things for herself in a very, very aggressive way, because a lot of what this episode starts off as is Rogue on a hell-bent mission to find out information, specifically find out information about the whereabouts of Gyrick and Trask, because she knows them to be responsible. And we first see her break into a U.S. Army base, essentially to capture General Thunderbolt Ross, who makes a cameo here, and she just destroys everything in her path. I mean, she is just absolutely unhinged at this point to get information, to find out their whereabouts. What did you think about this opening? Just to see Rogue showcasing all of her power and really kind of showcasing how indestructible she can be. Once again, under the right circumstances, this circumstance being her anger and her aggressiveness after the death of Gambit.
Yeah, it all makes sense to me. Rogue, you know, with her power set has always kind of been some muscle, right? And I think by the way she, you know, decides to carry herself post the death of her two men, right? As even Nightcrawler even calls out, it's like, yeah, you did something for both of them. Is it just makes sense. She's probably tired of mourning. You know what I mean? Like she's probably like, I'm not here to cry no more. I'm done going to funerals. I'm about that action. So she pulls up and she's about that action. She's trying to figure out what's going on. I love it, man. I really do. I thought he was very true to the character and what Rogue was trying to set out to achieve, and that's to find out who the hell did this, who killed Gambit and Magneto. And so yeah, here we are, her going crazy, going ham. Yeah, I just love to see it. It was good.
I mean, just her pulling up. She's flying like Superman out of nowhere in the middle of the desert. She
Mm-hmm.
pulls up to this base. She is throwing army tanks, slamming them on top of each other. I mean, she's just rocking shit left and right. And I'm like, yo, where have we
Yeah.
seen this Rogue at in recent memory? Not in any way in this capacity. She's just really, really angry and upset and has no patience at this point. So you have to understand, because she is under the pretense that Magneto is also dead, as you said. There are two people
Mm-hmm.
very close to her that she feels like she's lost, and now she's beyond patience. She's beyond doing things the right way or the politically
Right.
correct way. It's like, oh yeah, we'll do a life for a life situation. You take what's, what I consider close to me. You take a life from me, somebody that I
Mm-hmm.
love and adore. I'm gonna do the same to you if it comes to that, which we see by the end of this episode. It does certainly come to that. And it was also great to see Thunderbolt Ross here, on the receiving end of it. Obviously, he would have some sort of information, but we see that her journey takes her elsewhere because she comes into contact with none other than Captain America. Steve Rogers himself makes an
Crazy.
appearance in this episode. He's off, sort of in an isolated base in a snowy location. Now, this isn't the first time that Captain America has been in this X-Men animated series. He
Mm-hmm.
was originally in the animated series back in the 90s. He was actually in an episode with Wolverine. They were
Mm-hmm.
recounting old war stories together. It's a really, really good episode. And so we see him pop back up here. The music hits. And again, she's looking to get information. And Steve is in an interesting position because he knows exactly what happened in Genosha, and he empathizes with Rogue and he empathizes with what's happened with mutants. But essentially, he can't team up, or at least he doesn't want to team up with the X-Men in public because it'll send a message if he does so.
Mm-hmm.
Because right now there's this big mutant versus human war, and so he doesn't want to necessarily ruffle feathers. He also has a relationship with the president of the United States as well that he's trying to maintain to some extent. And so he's very much playing the game and being very aware of every move that he makes. Once again, that's just not good enough for Rogue. She's just not
Mm-hmm.
having it. She's unhappy about that. Like, where are you? You're supposed to be helping. And she's upset and angry and feels that he's a coward. So there's a lot that happens between these two in particular, considering Steve is certainly a leader in the superhero community. And now Rogue
Yeah.
is taking up the mantle as being a leader to go find and search for answers. What did you think about this conversation, this interaction between these two, and just the appearance of Captain America and the role that he played in the story?
Yeah, I couldn't help but to think about the version of Captain America that we get here that I think is actually probably more accurate to who he is in comics versus the MCU version that we get, where the MCU version that we get between Civil War and Winter Soldier, post Civil War is like and Loki a little bit anti-establishment. This ain't that Captain America. This is the cop. This is Loki, the cop, Captain America, the one. He really is kind of the poster child for America, and so it makes sense meeting him in this way where he's like, I can't really get into this too much. You know, I can't make this look messy. But we're in some ways we are on the same side, Rogue. And Rogue, like you said, she's pissed. She's upset. She's no longer Rogue is so done with like any in between. She's done with the bullshit. She's done with the weaving in and out of whatever your moral compass is. She's like, no, there's a very clear side here, and this isn't right. And so I just love how petty she becomes. Right, the conversation they have. She literally takes a shield and throws it like a child, like across
That's
the
a big
world.
dick move that she
A
did to just like
big, oh
to
my
just throw
god.
it out of nowhere. I'm just like, yeah, that's hilarious that she just took his shit and like didn't want it. Just like, no, you can't have it either, motherfucker.
Like, how's he gonna get that back? Like for real, like a serious question. Like, is there a tracker on the shield? Because Captain America can't fly. How is
Nope.
he going to get the shield back? Like, I just don't know. Is he going to get another one made? Like, I really have no idea.
Better call Air Force One and search that shit out. You're gonna have to call the president and send out a search mission for it. Because like you said, it probably in the 90s, it probably doesn't have a tracker on it. I'd be
It
shocked, but yeah,
probably.
it's gonna be tough for him to get that back.
No, you're right. There probably is no tracker on it. But yeah, I just thought it was a cool interaction. I love that they make them they make these two characters have to talk to each other because they are on like such different playing field right now within the series. And it's like, Captain America, what are you doing here? So I thought it was a really cool cameo. But yeah, Rogue is funny as hell for throwing that shield.
Yeah, I think to go back to your point about the depiction of him and where he falls, his allegiances, I think that's just also a product of the time period of the show. Like this is
Agreed.
still in the
Yeah,
90s.
that's true.
And so at that particular time and in that era, I think a lot of us in the country, that's I can't speak, I wasn't an adult, but I think it's safe to assume that things were mostly peaceful. There wasn't necessarily this big anti-authority message at that
Mm-hmm.
time. There were
Mm-hmm.
a lot more, I think, a lot more apprehensions around technology.
Yeah.
Of course, that would certainly take shape in the next few years. But as we see, once we get Steve Rogers in the MCU, once those movies come around, particularly Winter Soldier and Civil War, the
Mm-hmm.
country's in a totally different place. And to have a rah rah jingoistic Captain America in those movies would have felt strange and out of place. Where it's like,
Yeah, it
hey,
would
bro,
have.
it's post 9/11. Like, what? Why are we
Mm-hmm.
so quick to side with the establishment? So much has happened. 9/11, obviously the police's role and brutality and all the injustices that occur. And so it was good of them to make a point of that he is very much still siding
Mm-hmm.
with the government and with the country and trying to do things the right way. Whereas again, Rogue is just, she's not here for that shit. She's here to get to the bottom of it as quickly as possible.
Facts.
We should switch over to Jubilee and Sunspot. They have a pretty key component to the story that's been brewing for the past few episodes. Obviously, I think Sunspot's biggest conflict within himself has been his desire to want to tell his parents about him being a
Mm-hmm.
mutant, but also his fear for not being accepted by them. And Jubilee really urges him to reveal his true mutant form to his parents because now that this huge attack in Genosha has happened, it's about to be on the news. Like everybody's going to know about this very
Mm-hmm.
soon, and you don't want your parents to find out that you're a mutant on the 5 o'clock news. Like that's no
Right.
way, no way to tell them. And so he agrees, although somewhat reluctantly. But they eventually they take an elevator up to this really lavish condo that his parents are living in, and his parents already knew that he was a mutant. This is no
Mm-hmm.
shocker to them, particularly his mother, who he's talking to, because she says like there's been like 3 apartment fires or 3 house fires since you were 16. Like we've been known this. Like something's off with you. And so it seems that all is well. Like she is perfectly accepting of him being a mutant. There's no issues. They love him all the same. It's exactly the type of response that you want. However, the caveat and the catch is that, well, that's not quite the case. We love and accept you, but we have to hide this because his mother is more concerned about their company and their fortune, and she doesn't want to ruffle the feathers of shareholders knowing that
Mm-hmm.
there's a mutant in the family, considering everything that's happening in the world. Mutant human relations are trash right now. And so she's like, yeah, we have to do everything we can to conceal this. You have to be discreet and you have to completely disassociate from all of the X-Men. We can't have you be seen with any of them. And so you still can't be who you are, even though you've told us this huge secret that you've been carrying. And so it completely goes against the journey that he's been on. But it certainly presents again another roadblock for him that he's going to have to overcome at some point and sort of deal with in terms of the relationship with his parents. How did you feel about just seeing all this play out, knowing that it took him a long time to get here, and then once he finally got here, it was still not necessarily for nothing, but it certainly comes with a huge catch from the side of his parents.
Yeah, it's almost, and I'm making up a term here, like backhanded acceptance, right? Almost like a backhanded compliment, where it's like, yeah, you're a mutant, but now you can't tell anybody. And it's like, what? What are you saying? Like, I finally not only accepted myself, but I'm literally told you guys so that you will accept me. And now I can't tell anybody. Like, that's it. That's where we draw the line. It's kind of ridiculous, you know. But you know, I feel like we've seen different examples of that sort of thing from parents, just throughout all kind of media, movies and stories. Like that happens all the time. But I can imagine being, Sunspot in this moment where it's like, I just can't imagine all of this time you have known. And I kind of get from the mom side, or I guess the parent side, was like, you kind of have to tell us that you're a mutant, right? Like I get that point, but I feel like Roberto has, I think, something else in him that I know he's like hella pissed right now. Like probably the most angry that you can possibly be. Because now what am I supposed to do? I'm supposed to disassociate from the people who just accepted me for who I was off the rip. And
Mm.
now you're telling me to hide myself. It's just the craziest thing to me. And so I feel for him. I really do hope that things get better. I don't know what's going to happen completely. I'm sure he'll rebel and all of those things, but it's ridiculous. And I really do feel for him, because that is happening also in real time. Oh, what do you support? I support this thing. That's cool, but don't tell nobody. Whoa, don't tell nobody. I love how they're, again, always real world implications with this TV show. There's always something realistic happening between almost every interaction that we can relate to. So again, really good writing. But yeah, I thought it was good, but it sucks, if that makes sense.
No, for sure. I mean, it's almost worse in reality than just
Hmm.
being outright rejected by your parents, because at least you know where they stand and you don't necessarily have to change anything. You just told
Yeah.
them, you got that burden off your shoulder. You can still have this relationship, you can still have this chosen found family in the X-Men, but now it's a completely different animal of a different color and shape entirely, because
Hmm.
yeah, the parents accept you, but you gotta conceal it. You have to still hide yourself and not be who you are. And it's like, oh, that sucks even worse now, I think, to a certain extent. And so it definitely presents him with the challenge that like you said, I think he'll have to somewhat rebel against and figure out a way to navigate, because it is tricky
Hmm.
waters, because his family does have a fortune and they have a
That's
legacy
true.
and a company to protect. And so is he
A lot of
going to
money.
be willing to potentially sacrifice that and ruffle
Mm.
feathers and cause
Hmm.
possible trouble that may occur on the part of shareholders and other supporters of their company for the sake of him being who he is.
Hmm.
Hopefully he can have a conversation with them, or hopefully something can happen with these relationships between mutants and humans to where he doesn't have to make that choice, because that's a heavy choice to make. But it's difficult. It's a difficult scenario all around. Shifting gears once again, we do see that the X-Men travel back to Genosha to look for more survivors. And Genosha is just a wasteland at this point. It's completely been decimated by the attack, which, I think overall is really hammered home in this episode, that this is going to be a key defining event for not just
For
the
sure.
season, but probably the series moving
Hmm.
forward. Like, this is kind of ground zero for them. We do find out that Emma Frost is still alive, but Madeline Pryor and Magneto, who we thought was dead, they're still presumed dead. Again,
Hmm.
Magneto's not actually dead, he's just been kidnapped. But just seeing Genosha in that form, really sort of just like taking the time to see the decimation after that attack, I thought that was a really key component to the episode. And of course, starting off with the funeral as well. Like, this is all just like really heavy stuff. And there's even a moment with Beast and the reporter where they're having a conversation, and even Beast is just like completely angered by everything, and he's
Pissed.
on edge. He's not even able to have a reasonable conversation at this
Hmm.
point, because everybody is just obviously they're holding this over their head, that this is just something that's taken out so many mutant lives.
Hmm.
What did you think about just that setup, and obviously seeing the whole destruction happen in episode 5, but then now dealing with the fallout and just like the possible ramifications and repercussions that we experienced in this episode with all of the characters, but then of course everything is going to mean for the future.
Yeah, so much. Bill DeMayo has taken to Twitter a lot recently, but importantly, he did confirm. I don't know if "confirm" is the right word, but he did say that the fall of Genosha is heavily inspired by 9/11 and the Pulse nightclub shooting.
Mm,
And so when we come back to Genosha, you feel, I guess, remnants of both of those real life disasters that we have within the environment that we see of a fallen Genosha. It is very dark. Um, there was like there's rats looking for dead bodies. Like, it is so sad. I mean, there's mutants crying, and the beds, the health beds or whatever you call them, are all over the place. It's just such a very sad moment. Like you said, it will define probably X-Men 97 for the rest of its runtime. Like, we'll probably be talking about this in season 4 if we get one. It's like, yeah, oh yep, that was caused by the fall of Genosha. And it's yeah, man, it's just so crazy. I think, to see mutants in this way, in the way that it's fallen. But there are people like Amelia Vaught and a lot of these like random cameos of people who are, I guess, uh they are the view of anger and sadness in this moment of what everything is supposed to be. Trish Tilby is talking to Beast. Like you said, Beast is pissed. Trish is like talking about the state of humanity and the fears of mutant kind, and Beast isn't having it. But I think the repercussions of all of this is going to play into, and we'll talk about later, Bastion's hand, as everyone is getting so angry, and everyone's getting so mad. I think this is exactly everything that Bastion wants. And so it's kind of been hard for me to watch, not from a it's bad or anything standpoint, but like, dang, y'all, stop. Everybody stop and think for a second. This is why we need Professor X back. This is why we need Storm back. Like, I need everyone to calm down. And I think Rogue is kind of the beginning of that. In seeing the fall of Genosha and the state that it it's a callback to what she's fighting for, but at the same time, we gotta keep a level head, and it feels like we're not doing that without Professor X around. So that's kind of what I've been thinking as we watch, the Genosha being crumbles, and all of these mutants laying around. But shout out to Emma Frost. Finally, she got her diamond form, which I don't think they've ever done in the cartoon version,
I don't think
an
so. I don't remember.
animated version.
Yeah, I don't remember seeing
Yeah,
her
but
in that
it does
way.
happen in comics. Like, it's actually a pretty popular thing. Like, when she goes like pure diamond form. So it was really cool to see that. It was really cool to see that she's she's a telepath that's alive. Because one last thing I want to say is, like, I remember saying, like, they can't kill everybody. You know what I'm saying? Like, they can't kill Magneto. They can't kill Gambit. They can't kill you can't kill Magneto, Gambit. I don't even know, Shaw's still alive. Like, you can't kill all these people. So it was good to see, like, oh, Emma's alive. You know what I mean? It's like, oh shoot, somebody's alive. Because Bo DeMayo also did confirm that both Callisto and Leech are like dead. And I
Hmm.
remember being like, oh shoot, like, did they all die, or did they kill all these people? So yeah, it's been crazy. I can't believe all these deaths are happening, but we need Professor X back. Long story short.
Yeah, yeah, no, for sure. I think, also outside of just like the horrific damage that we see from Genosha and just all of the aftermath, which is it's quite startling just considering all of the death that did occur, but also just this philosophical disagreement that a lot of people are in. I think, one of the biggest things that we're seeing happen in real time throughout the show is that this idea of human tolerance for mutants and
Mm,
acceptance is now it's now being questioned. And I think that that's
hmm
Beast's whole stand. That's why he gets so pissed at Trish, because he's like, we shouldn't have even sought this out to begin with, because look at what it's gotten us, and look at
yeah.
look at what's happening here. And we've seen that idea revisited multiple times, where even in Rogue, from a physical standpoint, everything that she's doing in this episode, she's
hmm
done with doing things the polite, politically correct, and the appropriate way. Even if it means killing, which she does in this episode, that's what it's going to take. And I think
hmm
that, even a few episodes ago, we saw Cyclops, get pissed at Trish as well, saying, we aren't the same. We are mutants. We are special. We shouldn't have to or we shouldn't have to be tolerated. We should have to
Right.
tolerate you guys as humans,
hmm
because at the end of the day, supremely more powerful. And so I think all of that philosophical ideology is coming into question over and over and over again, just because that's the whole dynamic that we've seen exist for years and years and years between
Mm-hmm.
Charles and Magneto. Just this push and pull of what's the appropriate way to get the right rights for mutants and to be accepted, and where the pecking order should be, per se. And so I just love that they continue to go back to that idea throughout the course of the series. But ultimately, they are able to get a few answers, and we end up going to Madripoor because Bolivar Trask has basically tipped them off that they should be coming to Madripoor again to give them information about everything that's happening here. And so they arrive, and Trask is basically saying that, Mr. Sinister, who we thought to be behind this whole thing, was basically somebody that never took him serious, and he was very much sort of at the end of his road, and he was ready to just end his life. He's given this whole sob story and speech. He's ready to jump off of a building and just call it
Mm-hmm.
quits. Rogue, she's not allowing that to happen. She's like, wait a second, give me some answers. Tell me what's going on about the Sentinels. Tell me what the hell is happening here. And Trask is like, I don't got anything. I ain't got no information for you, bro. And she's like, oh, great. Neither do I. And in one of the coldest fucking sequences so far in this series, just drops him, just lets him fall to his death,
I
or
said, oh.
his apparent death. Which again just illustrates how far things have gotten with Rogue, how
Mm-hmm.
things have gotten so dark and bad with her that she's willing to take a life. And on one hand, you have Morph in the background, like, oh my God, is this who we're becoming? And then you also have Logan, who's like, well, it's about time somebody did something about it. So again, we're seeing everybody just start to go in different directions. Everybody doesn't see this conflict the same, but it's definitely a
Mm-hmm.
shocking moment when she does that. What did you think about just that moment, just knowing that Rogue just willingly let him die, was willing to get to that place again of sacrificing somebody's life over the cause that she's apparently fighting for?
Oh man, Rogue is, again, she is completely off the hinges at this point. To where it's it's like I just really can't believe sometimes that she's doing this. But also there's another side of me that's like, of course, if you got pushed to that point, that you would start to do that, right? I think even in the episode, the Beast quotes Martin Luther King. He's like, riots are the language of the unheard. And I'm like, well, yeah, that's exactly right. And I think and I think for some X-Men like Rogue, like maybe Wolverine is even saying, it might be time to make some drastic changes. Revolution isn't always peaceful. You know what I mean? And that's of course where Charles Xavier always stood, but now without him around again, that direction, it makes sense that some people are falling off that other end, going to the other side and being like, it's time for some extremes in order to get potentially the peace that we deserve and that we need. And Rogue has just fit into that specific mold right now. And so it was still shocking, but at the same time, when you think about it, it's like y'all gone through so much. Like at this point, it's like, what else can I possibly do in order to protect my people? That's not violence, right? And again, I love how more real world implications. It's just really cool. I think to see that we're having that conversation in a TV show like this, it's really great. But yeah, what Rogue is gone, man, and I can't blame her. I can't blame her.
Yeah, I mean, it's also one of those things where, with the individual in particular,
Mm-hmm.
Trask, he has caused so much damage and
So
harm
much.
for the mutants, for so long and for years and
Mm-hmm.
years. And
Mm-hmm.
you have to question and wonder, well, when is enough enough? Like, are we just going to lock this guy up once again for him to figure out a way to come back and do the same shit over and over again?
Mm-hmm.
On the other side of things with DC, it's the conundrum with Batman and the Joker. Batman isn't willing
Mm-hmm.
to kill, but the Joker is an unstoppable force who just will be unrelenting and will never allow himself to stop. He's going to come back over and over and over again. And when is enough enough? And I think that that's a
Mm-hmm.
similar place that Rogue is in mentally here, where it's like, all right, well, you have nothing for me. I don't need you. We can just end this shit here right now, and the story is over for you. And
Yep.
yeah, I agree. I'm like, I can't totally be mad at it, and Xavier
Yeah.
not being that North Star here, not being that guiding
Mm-hmm.
light that he typically is. It puts everybody in a really, really vulnerable position to where there isn't a voice, there isn't a singular presence that can be that guiding light for them. And so now you have, I think, the chaos that exists amongst these X-Men. That's really the main problem. It's not necessarily, well,
Exactly.
I shouldn't say that it's not necessarily the Rogue killed somebody. Like, that's a problem, sure, but
Mm-hmm.
the bigger issue is that lack of chemistry and the dissension amongst them and their own, because they
Mm-hmm.
aren't working and for the same thing anymore. They're all working for different things, and
Yeah.
they might not even know what they're working for. It could even be that
Mm-hmm.
place entirely, because Charles has not been around.
Right.
But her doing that triggers this program that turns Trask into this human Sentinel hybrid, and all hell breaks loose. It's a big attack. Sentinels pull up in Madripoor. It's going crazy. There's a big fight that breaks out. There's a lot going on.
Mm-hmm.
More destruction. And before long, Cable shows up. He's able to defeat Trask, who's turned into the Sentinel. And basically explains to them that Sinister is not working alone, as we thought he was. In
Mm-hmm.
actuality, he's working with an even greater threat, an even more formidable foe, and in probably the biggest shocker of the season in terms of who the big bad is, who we're supposed to be pointing our vitriol at. It turns out that Bastion is actually the big threat. He's the one that's been maneuvering and operating behind the scenes, and basically been pulling or excuse me, orchestrating this entire thing. And in addition to that, we also find out that he knows that Xavier's still alive, so he has this
Mm-hmm.
information, and also that Magneto is alive and in his presence, and he has him kidnapped. And so he was able to actually extrapolate Magneto from the wreckage of Genosha, and he has him in his possession at this point. So lots of stuff that they dump on us there, and they
Yeah,
completely sort of
lots.
alter just the course and the trajectory of the rest of the season, and really, again, who's the main foe that we're paying attention to. So what do you think about this reveal, the fact that Bastion is kind of the guy, and also the connective tissue that exists there between his origin, the Sentinels, and how they've been playing a role
Mm-hmm.
here, and I guess what that may mean for the rest of the season?
What's crazy is Bo DeMayo told us that there's been cameos of Bastion since episode 3. I said, huh? Are you serious? Episode 3.
Yeah.
That's a lot of cameos, man. I think he said, like, except for like episode 6, there wasn't really one, but
Yeah, I saw a photo where there's like a quick shot of the top of his head at the gala that they
yeah.
had in Genosha before
Yep.
shit really went down the drain. But it's so quick. Like, if you're not paying attention at all, you're not gonna think about Bastion. There's no reason to
Nah.
think that that's him at all. So it was kind of
Nah.
crazy.
You'd have to like slow down every frame, or some people do, right? They literally go through and go boop, 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 slow down every frame to see that. But yeah, it's crazy to see that Bastion has kind of been, again, a looming presence pretty much throughout the entire season. And just what a big, I guess, subject Bastion is, because there's so much. One, of course, is Operation Zero Tolerance, right? What we're talking about, which is the ploy for Bastion to make humans into human sentinels, which is insane. But also, you know, Bastion, of course, being Nimrod and Master Mode combined, which is, it's a cool idea. But what I was saying at the top of the episode is it didn't always work in the comics. Like, not that it was necessarily bad. It just was not the best. Like, when people talk about X-Men villains, think about how often Bastion gets brought up. It's just not really a thing that people talk about, because he was just one of those, you know what I mean? And so I think they are taking a swing by having Bastion here, because it's one of those storylines where, again, this is my personal opinion anyways, where the source material was not 1,000% great. You know what I mean? It's not the best source material, but it's a swing because they actually have an opportunity to make this a really cool story. And I think the way that they presented it to us, the way they kind of unveiled it, the way Bastion is working with Mr. Sinister, who we thought was, of course, one of the biggest bads, but here comes Bastion. It's like, no, he's been kind of working for me, and I'm like, oh shoot, that's kind of crazy. So I like the way I think they're doing things right now. But I think there's a lot going on, man. And I think the concept of humans becoming human sentinels and potentially looking like they have the X gene, which of course they don't, right? It's just very high level technology that they have in their bodies. It's just a really cool concept. And it becomes scary at that point. It does become almost like a version of Secret Invasion, where I'm looking at you and you could be a sentinel, and I would never know, you know. And so I think they have a chance to do some really cool things here with Bastion, man. I think we'll just have to see how it plays out.
Yeah, it's one of those things where even beyond what you've already mentioned with some of the source material, it not necessarily being the greatest storyline, and the potential for hiccups. My biggest issue with this reveal, and I'm still waiting to see obviously what's going to take place, but my biggest issue with this reveal is the fact that at this point now in this series, there have been a lot of bluffs and double bluffs and things that we've walked back and retcons and
Mm,
things that turn it. This is like multiple times now that
yeah.
we've been told, oh yeah, this guy is the bad guy, where in
Mm,
actuality that's not the case. This is like the third time now. And even beyond that, the character deaths, like portraying a character potentially to be dead only to turn out and find out that they are indeed alive. I mean, they
mm-hmm.
they played it up with Charles. Okay, we can go with that because we know that he's really not dead. We never saw him die
Right.
in the original series. Even Magneto, we can go with that, even though you certainly created a scenario where he could have been killed off. It was a very visceral moment. The only one that they've truly really stuck with has been Gambit on a large
Mm-hmm.
level. There's
Right.
just been a lot of walkbacks because I don't necessarily believe Madeline Pryor is completely gone. I think she'll turn up at some point,
I think so
likely
too.
again. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's my only thing where it's like you can start to really write yourself into just so many twists and turns and reveals and fake reveals and red herrings. Like all of these things can just really create a muddled storyline, and you could potentially lose faith and trust from the audience if you do that
Yeah.
too much. And for it to have only been 7 episodes, I do think that we've gotten a lot of that, more
Mm-hmm.
than's probably been necessary. And so hopefully for the remainder 3 episodes, we can just kind of like ride this out. This is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
There's no more corners to turn. There's no more twists that we're going to introduce.
Mm-hmm.
The remaining 3 episodes are going to be a little bit more straightforward. Because even by the end of this, Charles has still not made it back. Storm has still not made it back. So we have to see how they factor into the storyline as well, because they've also had several scenarios where they told us one thing and then we kind of walk it back and we change it
Mm-hmm.
up again. So that's my biggest hesitation with this episode, this reveal, and really kind of the entire season. But still don't doubt and deny that it can all still work and pay off in a really, really great way. But it certainly does. It does mean a lot again for what they can do, like the Operation Zero Tolerance stuff, like you said, that could have potential big implications. And I'm really just interested to know all of these different forces at play. There's been a lot of villains, obviously the government and just like the
Mm-hmm.
perception from humans. Like there's so much working
Mm-hmm.
against the mutants and the X-Men in
Yeah.
particular right now. Like it feels like the walls are closing in, and
Mm-hmm.
the light at the end of the tunnel is almost gone now. I mean, what do you make of just all these opposing forces, from an institutional standpoint, a government
Mm-hmm.
standpoint, obviously the villains who either hate mutants or they want to shape mutants in their own image and make them into something completely different. What do you just make of all these different opposing forces that are at play right now, and how we can, I guess, make it all make sense and tie all of these loose threads up together in these remaining 3 episodes?
Yeah, I think this is really the crux of what X-Men is supposed to be. It is everybody against you, and your back is against the wall, but for you to have that resiliency and that belief that you can prevail, that's X-Men. That's what it's about. And so it is crazy how many things are stacked against them, like you said. But I think with the ability of somebody like Cable who can time travel, I do think they're going to do like timeline things, multiple timelines. I think that is how we're going to get into the MCU kind of stuff for sure. But also, is Val Cooper Mystique? You know what I'm saying? Like that's helpful. If Val Cooper's Mystique, you know what I'm saying? Like there's just so many things I think on the table that, of course, it's all looking bad. But I think it's going to take all these small little pieces to come together for the X-Men to have some levity, get their backs off the wall. 3 episodes left. I thought maybe at the end of this episode we would get like Storm or something, you know what I mean? But maybe they are saving that for 7 or for 8 or 9 or something like that. But I think when Storm gets back again, somebody else who probably would have been a voice, who couldn't be a voice at the time, and Professor X is back, I think there's a ton of hope that's on the table. And in all things considered, between those two, Cable, again, Val Cooper question mark. Mystique question mark. I don't know that they'll be able to get their lives together, man, and truly be the X-Men that we need again, that fighting X-Men that we need again. But to be honest, in the meantime, it's kind of I know this sounds terrible, but it's kind of fun to see them crumble. because they have to come out of it though, right? Like that's what makes that good. That's what makes the show good. Is like, oh, I can't wait till they get out of this. If they get out of this, but they won't go unscathed. And so yeah, I'm very excited to see what happens.
Yeah, and as we both said at the top, their ability to stuff so much into these episodes has been, for lack of a better term, it's been uncanny. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that this ultimately is just the building blocks in the beginning of a very long story that we're going to be telling for the next few years. And any good show is solving a few of the stories that you set up in your first season, but you're opening up the possibilities for many more things to come.
Mm-hmm.
And knowing that we only have 3 episodes left, there are huge issues at play that will not be solved in episode 10. No way. There has to be more story, more roadmap for seasons 2 and 3, and however long this goes. And so I think that they have things that are their A stories, which are these big, big overarching things that are going to continue to be big factors for the next few seasons. And then they have B and C stories, smaller
Mm-hmm.
things, lower stakes things, relatively, that can be solved and wrapped up within these next few episodes. And so I think that they're playing the game really well here to introduce all these huge ideas while still
Yeah.
at the same time, making sure that we're getting progress with the primary story that we've been following, because for the time being, this is an isolated show. We're just focusing on mutants. We don't have to deal with
Mm-hmm.
Avengers or
Right.
Inhumans or Internals or Spider-Man. Like, this is their story. And so knowing that that's the case, I think that they have a really, really good path in front of them. And so we'll certainly have to see what the remaining 3 episodes will be. We'll have to see how this show starts to enter into the home stretch. But folks, those are all of our thoughts on episode 7 of X-Men 97. If you've checked out this episode, definitely hit us up and let us know what you think.